Huh. Well, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is what you've been up to the past. We've been in lockdown, what, 4, 5, 6 weeks now at this
Right,
point?
right.
You told me on Friday that you wanted to get in 3 hours of training every day
Yeah.
this weekend.
Yeah, well, the weekend, yeah, but I'm doing a couple hours of training on the weekdays and a few hours. So I do a lot of cycling, and back 99 to 2005, did a lot of cycling and racing and so on, and had an internet coach for a while just to sort of make sure I was doing things right. And
How do you get plugged in with an internet coach?
I had just heard, because that was back when Lance Armstrong was like at his prime. So he won
Right.
the Tour de France from 99 to 2005. I won the Ohio State Championship from 99 to 2005. And so back then, his coach, Chris Carmichael, had like an online coaching service. And I said, well, I'm going to do that.
Sure.
And so I went online and found it. And I didn't have Chris Carmichael as my coach, but he had a whole bunch of people who were coaches, and you sort of filled out information, and they sort of said, well, you'd probably be good with this person or that person. You're not a serious cyclist, meaning like a professional person, who's going to spend 6 or 7 hours a day riding their bike. And so you don't want one of those guys because they'll expect too much. And so I had a coach for about a year and a half until I thought, I could probably do this now. I've learned enough. And then, so I raced for a while, and then just was more of a hobby. And then I decided sometime around the beginning of the year, right before my 60th birthday, that it would be a good year in cycling, every 5 years or every 10, depending, you're in a new age group. So it's age group racing. And so, of course, at 60, you're at the beginning of your age group, theoretically, as good as you're going to get. So I figured this year would be a good year to try to set a new record at our local Cleves time trial race, which has been going on for about 50 years. And so I got an internet coach again, and sent him all my travel schedule, and he said, geez, this is going to be tough. He said, I'm not sure whether to feel sorry for you or to be jealous. And then, a month later, this was in mid-February when I signed him up, and a month later, I emailed him and said, all my trips are canceled because of the COVID thing. And he said, good, now you can train seriously. And so I said, okay, yeah, you can. I'm not seeing patients like I was. I have a lot more free time during the week. And so he bumped up my training. And so now I'm probably in better shape than I've been, and looking forward to the races. If they have the race, it usually runs from May to September every Tuesday night. And it's certainly been postponed probably until Ohio allows gatherings of 50 people or more, which I'm hoping will be before the end of the season, so I can put the training to a race. Although I will be, in 2 weeks, I'm going to go race on the course like it's a real race, just as a practice kind of a thing.
So May to September every Tuesday night, you said?
Every Tuesday night.
And then what is it, like the cumulative total?
No, it's just, people just go, and they have it, when it's a good day for them, a good Tuesday. That way, if it's raining and crappy, it doesn't matter because it's just one of the Tuesdays out of the series. But it's every Tuesday night. It's been this way for like 50-something years. They think it's the longest running, like, continuous kind of race like this in the country. And they even did like a documentary film thing on it, low budget amateur kind of thing a couple of years ago. So they have records for everybody forever, So I figured that would be a good goal, keep me busy, and so far so good. We'll see.
I was reviewing what DeWine put out over the weekend, and I'm hopeful that some of the stuff within the next 2 or 3 weeks will.
Right, unless there's this big peak, and then he says go backwards.
Right. Well, I was hearing that I think he would be much more open to it if the number of COVID cases was on a steady decline for 14 days, and I'm not quite. We're pretty lucky, thankfully, here.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're quite at a 14-day decline.
No, and I don't know what will happen. Of course, the whole question is going to take at least a couple of weeks to know what happens with the, relaxing the social or the businesses and all that stuff, and then a couple of more weeks. And so we may not really even know until the end of May, what the real effect is of relaxing everything.
So let's say this whole thing opens up in June. You go in on a Tuesday night, you set the record in your age group.
That's it.
But then let's say someone comes in July or August and beats your record. Can you come back and do it again? Okay.
Sure, yeah. Or next year, or, so you can race as many times as you want, once in the whole summer, or you could every night. There are guys that do it every Tuesday night. And some of them, I think they must be using kind of for training, and some of them, they're serious,
So post September every year, is that like your off season, or do you still?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so you have it's all very regimented. You sort of have, you're done with your racing. So it's September, October, you kind of take it easy. You're still riding, but you're not pushing it. And then sort of October, November, December, you're lifting a lot more, doing a lot more weights, still doing some riding. And then around January, you start putting in sort of these long workouts, lots of miles, endurance type training. And then depending on your races, what you do is they say, okay, what are your pick, no more than 3 A races for your season. These are your big races. So it could be, like the state championships. It could be setting a record at this. It could be the national championships. Those are your 3 big things. When are they? Okay, hopefully there's some time in between them. And then your whole schedule is geared towards peaking at those 3 big races. Now you may have other B races or C races, but you won't peak. So it's very much it's called periodization. It's very much a, kind of build up a base and then train for the event you're doing, and then put in, as you get closer to the race, you actually put less training in, so you're fresher and ready to go, but still have that edge. And then hopefully that day of the race is when you're at your peak, and then you race. And then hopefully your next race is a month away or so you can then start not over, but start again with the sort of periodization and peaking for the next race.
So the internet coach helps with this, reviews your schedule.
Oh yeah, he sent me my May schedule a little late because I did a test yesterday so that he could create the right schedule. But every day it's, Monday this, Tuesday this, and it's different. It's not the same every week. It's an individualized thing. So he looks at you send him your workout data for the week, because of course these days my bike computer records everything: speed, how fast I'm pedaling, the cadence, what my average watts of power are, which is what they really base a lot on, and of course heart rate. And then he'll say, okay, for instance, my ride on Friday was interval ride. So you go warm up for 30 minutes, keep your heart rate below 130. Then do a couple short, like 1 minute intensity things to get your heart rate up a bit. Rest 5 minutes, spin easily. Then 3 12-minute intervals, keeping your heart rate no higher than 153, which is all based on testing you do to figure out, what the right heart rate is. Keep your cadence, how fast you're spinning the pedals at least 90, and by those 2 parameters, heart rate and pedals, try to make as many watts as you can. And then what you see as you get better and better is your average watts go up, keeping the other 2 things constant, heart rate and cadence. And then hopefully as you're improving, your average power goes up, which is what is happening.
So what are the physiologic parameters you track? Do you wear like a wrist monitor, a heart monitor?
I have a chest strap that connects to my cyclo computer, and so that records average heart rate, peak heart rate, current heart rate, and then there's that, and the power output those are the 2 main physiologic things. So how many watts can you generate? For time trialing, it's really on an average basis. So if you're like in a bike racer and sprinting, so how many watts can you do for 20 seconds? For time trialing, it's what can you average for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 50 minutes? Because the longest time trials are going to be about 24 miles, and the shortest about 10 miles.
How deep into it are you? Do you track like heart rate variability at all?
Not. I do. I mean, like for instance, what the descriptions of some of these things are, if you can't get your heart rate to this level within 10 minutes, you're overworked. Mm-hmm. Don't do this workout. Take it easy. Or if you can't keep your power at a certain level, at a certain heart rate, you're training too hard. Bag this workout and just take it easy. Ride for an hour and don't push it. So that sort of a thing. I don't check the heart rate stuff, during the course of the day. Like resting heart rate, I don't usually pay too much attention to that.
What sort of weightlifting do you do for cycling? I'm assuming it's a lot of posterior chain work, lower body.
Yeah, it is. When I got this coach, I said, well, what about lifting? And he said, I said, I do, my whole body's type stuff. And he said, well, of course you don't really need to do your upper body. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to look like a cyclist. When I look like, if someone says I look like a cyclist, that means I'm not doing enough upper body lifting. So he said, well, I'll tell you what you do for your lower body, but your upper body, do high repetitions, and you should be, when you're done with the set, you should be able to do another 10 reps, that same set. So in other words, take it easy. It shouldn't be a major focus. Keep in shape, keep toned, but you might want to lose a little upper body weight and concentrate on lower body. And so lower body, I do probably 2, 4, 7 exercises. And I usually, typically, maybe before I had the coach, I would do, 8, 10, maybe 12 repetitions per set, and then rest, and then do another 8 or 10 or 12 in that range. He's got me now doing sets of 50 of each of them.
Wow.
And 3. So I used to do 2 sets.
Endurance.
Yes.
Low weight, high rep.
Right. So we didn't start there. We started with 15 for a week, twice a week. So it's lifting twice a week. 15. Then the next week it was 20s. Then it was 25s, then 30s, then 40s, then 50s. And I said, I hope it's 50s. So when I got my schedule today, I said, I hope it's not going to be more than 50s. And the good news is I only have one more week of 50s. And then he said, we're going down to 20s. And don't increase your weights. Just leave them at 20. Whatever you're doing at 50, do them at 20, which will be really easy. But we're going to be doing more cycling. So your workouts will be shorter, which gives you more time for cycling, because you're going to get ready for that practice time trial. And so we don't want you need at least a couple of weeks of no lifting before a race.
So what are the movement patterns he's having you do? Are you doing like lunges, squats?
I'm doing step-ups where you just hold dumbbells and then step up onto other things. So you're, step-ups, hyperextensions for the lower back. I do leg presses and like reverse leg pulls where I've got like the thing wrapped around my ankle and a cable, and I stand up and throw my leg backwards with the weight. So it's like for the butt and the hamstrings.
Glute extensions.
Yeah, glute extensions. And then leg extensions and fitball leg curls, where you just lie on the floor and put your ankles on top of one of those fit balls, and you pull it in towards your butt and then out like that. And then calf raises for calves.
Is this everything you do, the weight training, the cycling? Is this all solo? Do you train with other people?
No, it's fun to, it's the problem is it is all solo, because in cycling, unless you're riding with someone who's, within 1 or 2% of what you can do, you can't do the kind of workouts, and there's just no way. And when you're cycling, if you're cycling even with one person and you draft with them, you need to put out so much less power if you're behind them than if you're in front of them, because most of your energy, once you get to 25 miles an hour, most of it's overcoming wind resistance. And so unfortunately, I like riding with people, but this kind of training, you just really can't. Some of the rides you could maybe, but not really. You'd have to be so evenly matched. And of course, your schedule would have to be the same as whoever else's schedule. And I don't have that luxury. I've got to do it when I can do it.
Right.
Usually.
This is fascinating for me to hear, because I cycled when I was really, really young, but I've never seriously done it. And when I moved back to Cincinnati after intern year, a good buddy of mine who's been into cycling and skating his whole life said, you should come with us. And so every Sunday on the Loveland Bike Trail, I would use one of his bikes, not fit to my body at all. He's much shorter than me. So by the end of it, I felt terrible.
Right.
But it was just a lot of fun. So I'm an amateur, below the level of an enthusiast. When you're pedaling, what part of the foot are you pushing down with? Are you engaging plantar flexion? Are you digging with the heel, or is it kind of a uniform?
I think the hardest part about the pedaling is that of course, if you're really into it, you have cycling shoes with a cleat,
right?
And the cleat is placed more or less under the ball of your foot. And so your toes are here, the cleat is here. So the only part of your foot that's connected to the pedal is right sort of the ball of your foot. And so that's where all the pressure's coming. And the hardest part, it's not so much that you're using your calves a lot, but it's called getting pedaling in a 360-degree effort. So your tendency is push down, and then you come around, push down. So that's called pedaling in squares. So my wife and I used to have a tandem, And she would always pedal in squares. It would drive me nuts. Whereas you want it to be as even a 360-degree effort as you can make it. So you have to sort of concentrate when you start to actually like you're scuffing mud off your shoe. Like, so if you put your shoe like on a welcome mat and you got mud on it and you push your foot back, you got to concentrate on that part of the motion. So ideally, you want to have a nice 360-degree effort where there's obviously the push down, but then the pull through and the push down. And in fact, on my indoor trainer, there's a circular graph of that. So it actually tracks your pressure. So if your circle looks like this, it shouldn't. It should look like this. So you can watch and try to make it look as circular as possible.
So you wear the cleats and you probably wear the special shorts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wear the cycling, the usual cycling stuff. And then what I do, time trialing, is unlike like most of what you'll see on the Tour de France, or this big group of people, riding in a pack. That's not, time trialing is the racing where it's one person against the clock. So it would be perfect for COVID because you start, and then depending on how long the course is and how many people, 30 seconds or a minute later, the next rider goes, and then the next rider. So you're not allowed to draft in this race. You can't. You'd be disqualified if you're drafting. So you've just got to basically ride as hard as you can. And so again, because of the aerodynamics, I mean, you have the helmet, the teardrop sort of, although they're getting away from the teardrop, but it's all about aerodynamics and having the right. I mean, I have a racing one-piece time trial suit that's made of material that's slippery in the wind.
You wear goggles and everything.
Oh, well, I've got a helmet that has a visor so that it's, and it doesn't have holes in it because that would be not aerodynamic. So, if you're racing, my races are always an hour or less. If you're an hour, I mean, your head gets hot, but it's a good trade-off for the aerodynamic thing. In fact, my first state championship in 1999, I decided I'm going to go do the state championship. And so I went, and I'd been riding a little bit, but not really racing. But some of the guys I was riding with, because I used to ride with, they said, "Oh, you should go try that state championship time trial." I said, "I don't know." And they did, just try it. So I went, and back then you couldn't get these aerodynamic helmets in the U.S. because they had to be a certain safety approval, but there wasn't a demand, and so they weren't available. And so I said, "Well, crap! I've got this helmet with all these vents." So I duct taped them. So I showed up at this race with a helmet with duct tape, on it. And I won by 6 seconds. And there's no question. The duct tape made the difference because it was like a 45-minute ride. And if you look at the calculations for an aerodynamic helmet versus not, it'd be like a minute on a 45-minute race. So no question the duct tape made a difference.
You have a carbon fiber bike?
Yeah.
What's the best? What's like the bike to get?
There's so many really good bikes. I just, for my 60th birthday, also got a new time trial bike. So it's called Parley. It's made in Massachusetts. So it's a custom made kind of a thing. But there's so many good, brands of bikes and so on. And they're all pretty aerodynamic, the bikes, which is why you personally, you're the biggest determinant. You're the biggest thing on the bike. And so that's why you got to make yourself as aerodynamic as possible.
So during this COVID time period, how much do you think your training's ramped up with this extra time you have?
Oh, probably at least 50%. Yeah, probably 50% more. So unfortunately, sort of, it's, starting this week, we're going back to more or less, for me, it'll be more or less normal. Maybe not quite normal, but it'll be approaching normal. So I, in fact, told my coach that, for May, you may have to back off on the weekday training. And he did. And so he sent me these workouts. And I said, now, did you back off on this particular? Because he had no riding. I used to just warm up 10 minutes on my bike and then do my lifting. So I just rode 10 minutes to warm up. And now he's got me doing 75 to 90-minute rides before the lifting. So before all those sets of 50, I ride for an hour and a half. So I said, listen, on a Wednesday, I can't, that's 3 hours. I can't do that when I'm working. I mean, I could, but I won't. So I can't have a 3-hour workout. So he changed it to just the lifting and with no riding. So I emailed him and said, now, are you doing that just because of I told you I didn't have time, or is that really the plan because we were doing other things, getting ready for the race? He said, no, I did it because you said you didn't have time. And I said, all right, so if I do have time, when I go to 20s, then I could ramp up do the riding. He said, yeah, whatever amount of time you have, once you figure out how long it takes you to do those sets of 20, ride the rest of the time. If that's 15 minutes on one day, fine. If it's an hour and 15 minutes on one day, fine.
Well, I think you're probably in the top 1% of people when it comes to exercise and physical fitness. I mean, since I've known you, I've always known that, staying in shape, being active was an important part of your life. But I've even had other attendings tell me, like, Carl really takes his fitness seriously. Is that something for most of your life that's always been a part, or did you realize along the way that exercise is the elixir?
No, it has. It really, since I've been like 13 or 14, a friend of mine said, we're going out for the track team. I said, I can't, I'm not a runner. He said, no, we're going to be weight men. We're going to throw the discus and shot put. And I said, well, okay. And he said, well, then we're going to have to lift to do that. And I said, oh, well, okay. So we started lifting back then. So in high school, my sport was the discus. And that's when I really started doing a lot of lifting. And I weighed about 20 pounds more in high school and college than I do now because that was a different sport.
Right.
I mean, it was, 2 seconds spin in the discus ring. And it was all powerlifting and that sort of stuff. So I started then, and I think definitely the longest time I've gone without lifting was a couple of years ago. I had a cycling accident and broke my collarbone and scapula and had to have surgery, and I couldn't lift for like a couple months. But since 13, that's by far the longest time I've gone without lifting. Although I still got on my bike on my indoor bike with a broken collarbone.
Yeah, what was recovery for that like? I remember when that happened. I didn't get a chance to talk to you in depth about it.
It was, the problem was the scapula was broken in like 3 places, and that's why I needed surgery. At first they said, and then I went to India, and then they emailed me and said, yeah, you need surgery. And I said, I'm in India. And they said, what? You went to India? And I said, you said it was all right. And they said, well, come back. We need to do the surgery within 2 weeks. And so the recovery time, I forget exactly how long he said not to do anything. It was really painful at first. So I didn't do anything, of course, for the first few weeks after the surgery. And then just kind of gradually got like on the indoor bike and just, kept my shoulder immobilized, and then gradually started doing a little bit more, and then started lifting. And the surgeon said, well, you'll probably be back in a year to pretty much your regular weights and all that stuff, but don't push it too much. And that's, it was probably less than a year that it took to get back to regular. I was doing everything, but it was obviously, I'm right-handed and it was my right arm. So I'm pretty much back. He said, well, you'll be back to your new normal, which is, it feels like there's like metal in my shoulder, which there is, titanium. It just feels a little funny. And one of the nerves to one of the small muscles was cut. And he said, well, your right arm probably just won't be your strongest arm anymore because we couldn't fix that. So do these exercises to build up the muscles and you'll be okay.
What was that like psychologically? Being so active and then being forced to really, really go to zero or slow it down.
It was depressing, I guess. It was one of those things where I think looking back on all the potential problems I could have had over the years, I was like, okay, it's like par for the course of having at least one of these things. I've had a couple of accidents on the bike. This one was by far the worst. And I had one a few years ago where I had to lay off for a couple of weeks. But I don't know. It wasn't terrible. Partly it wasn't terrible because it hurt so much. And I knew that it wasn't like I want to work out because it was painful just to, move my shoulder a little bit. So it wasn't probably as bad as I thought it was going to be.
How did it happen?
I was just riding down this hill and a car was coming. So I decided to move over a little bit, and my tire and wheel got caught in a little defect in the pavement. And it was just like I didn't know what happened. Honestly, all of a sudden, all I knew, I was on the ground, and I was my cyclocomputer said 28 when I fell off. But the wheel got in this depression, and I tried to just gently move, and it was too big a depression. And so it just threw me, thankfully, to the right, onto the ground, not the pavement. And I didn't know what happened. So my first ride, I went back and to look and say, well, how did this happen? I mean, it's very hard for, someone with all that momentum. I mean, you can imagine going 28 miles an hour, with me and my bike weighing 200 pounds to fall off. I mean, you hit a rock or something, no big deal. But I couldn't imagine how that happened until I actually went back and took pictures of the road. So they haven't fixed it yet either.
I had a similar accident when I was a kid.
Oh.
I've had 2 biking accidents, both around the age of like 5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so us kids in the neighborhood, we'd cycle around the cul-de-sacs, and there was sidewalks, huge sidewalks. We'd race on the sidewalks. But I was biking, and my front tire lined up perfectly with the width of one of the sewer grates.
Oh yeah,
and it got caught, and my bike did a complete 180.
Right.
And so I fell. I was facing the pavement, fell, and then there was another one where we were racing, and young Arjan was very focused on overtaking his competitor, and not aware of his surroundings. Went to overtake the guy and hit a mailbox.
Oh gosh!
And went flying into the road.
Well, the sewer grates these days, the newer ones don't have that. They have more of a crisscross, or they're going the other direction.
Right.
I
Like
think
crosshatch
partly
almost.
for that reason. But yeah, you got to watch out for those things.